The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Captain Jiwan's boots as he walked toward the ancient stone structure. The wind howled across the empty planet like the voices of ghosts. Above him, the alien sun cast strange shadows that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Captain, the readings are getting stronger," Yunji called out from her position near the communications array. Her voice crackled through the helmet radio. "Whatever is inside that building, it's definitely not natural rock." Jiwan stopped and looked at the massive structure before them. It rose from the ground like a black mountain, smooth and seamless. No doors, no windows, just perfect, dark stone that reflected nothing. The building had been here for thousands of years, maybe longer, but today, for the first time since they started studying it, something inside was responding to their scans. "Minho, what do your instruments say about the composition?" Jiwan asked. The young archaeologist checked his handheld scanner and frowned. "Sir, this material doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not quite metal, not quite stone. The molecular structure keeps shifting every time I try to get a reading." Behind them, Security Officer Hyun-woo kept watch on their surroundings. His weapon was ready but not drawn. They were alone on this planet, but something about this place made everyone nervous. The silence was too complete. Even their breathing sounded loud in the thin atmosphere. "Captain," Yunji said suddenly, "I'm detecting what might be a door mechanism. The electromagnetic signature just changed." As if responding to her words, a section of the black wall began to glow with soft blue light. Lines appeared in the smooth surface, forming the outline of an entrance. The light pulsed like a heartbeat. "Well, that's new," Hyun-woo muttered. "Should I call for backup from the ship?" "No," Jiwan said after a moment of thought. "But keep the communication channel open. If we don't report in every 30 minutes, tell them to pull back to a safe distance." The door slid open without sound. Beyond it lay a corridor that stretched into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on as they approached, creating a path deeper into the building. The air that flowed out was stale but breathable according to their sensors. "The atmosphere inside is different," Minho reported. "Higher oxygen content, almost like it was designed for life forms similar to us." They entered the corridor together, Jiwan leading with Hyun-woo covering the rear. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the walls were hollow. Strange symbols covered the surfaces around, them glowing faintly with the same blue light as the door. "These markings," Minho whispered, running his scanner along the wall. "They're not just decorative. I think they're some kind of data storage system. The patterns are too complex to be random." The corridor opened into a vast chamber. Their lights revealed a room the size of a stadium, filled with rows of what looked like sleeping pods. Each pod was made of the same strange material as the building, but these were transparent, and inside each one was a figure. "Are they alive?" Yunji asked, her voice barely audible. Jiwan approached the nearest pod carefully. Inside was a being. That looked almost human, but not quite. Taller, with longer limbs and features that were too perfect, too symmetrical. The being's skin had a pale blue tint, and its eyes were closed. "The life signs are minimal," Minho reported, checking his medical scanner. "But they're there. Whatever these beings are, they're not dead." As they moved deeper into the chamber, Jiwan noticed that one pod was different from the others. It sat alone at the far end of the room, and unlike the others, its occupants seemed to be stirring. The blue light around this pod pulsed faster. "Captain," Yunji called urgently, "that pod over there is showing massive energy spikes. Something is happening." They hurried toward the isolated pod. As they approached, the being inside opened its eyes. They were large and dark, filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. The being saw them, and its mouth opened as if trying to speak. But no sound came through the pod's walls. Then the pod began to open. A hiss of escaping gas filled the air. The transparent cover slid back with a soft mechanical sound. The being inside sat up slowly, as if waking from a very long sleep. When it spoke, the words came not from its mouth, but directly into their minds through some kind of telepathic connection. "You should not have come here," the voice said. It was female and filled with desperate urgency. "You must leave this place immediately. Seal the door behind you. Never return." But even as the words filled their minds with panic and warning, Jiwon looked into the being's eyes and saw something completely different. Terror, pleading, a desperate need for help that went beyond words. "Please," the mental voice continued, "do not release any of the others. Leave us here. It is safer for everyone if we remain sealed." The being struggled to stand, and they could see that she was weak from her long sleep. She looked at each of them in turn, and when her gaze met Ji-won's, he saw tears beginning to form in those large, dark eyes. "What's your name?" Ji-won asked aloud, not knowing if she could hear him. "I choose the designation Kayla for your understanding," she replied in their minds. "But you must go, now, before they begin to wake." "They?" Hyunwoo asked, gesturing toward the other pods. Kayla's mental voice became even more desperate. "The others. If they wake, if they are released, terrible things will happen. You do not understand the danger." But her eyes told a different story. As she begged them to leave, as she insisted they must not help, her eyes screamed something else entirely. They begged for salvation. They pleaded for someone to finally understand what she could not say aloud. Ji-won felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold air in the chamber. Something was very wrong here. This being was asking them to abandon her and her people. But every instinct he had as a human told him that abandoning anyone was not an option. "We need to get you medical attention," he said. "No," Kayla's voice was sharp with panic. "You must leave. Seal this place. Forget you ever found us." Behind them, Yoonji's equipment began beeping urgently. "Captain," she called, "I'm detecting seismic activity. Something large is moving beneath us." The floor trembled slightly. In the distance, they could hear a sound like massive machinery starting up after a long period of inactivity. "The others," Kayla whispered, and for the first time, her mental voice carried pure terror. "They are beginning to wake." The trembling in the floor grew stronger. Ji-won watched as Kayla struggled to stay upright, her pale blue skin growing even paler with each passing moment. The strange blue lights in the chamber began to pulse faster, and a low humming sound filled the air. "We need to move," Hyunwoo said, checking his weapon. "Whatever is down there sounds big." "No." Kayla's mental voice was weak but urgent. "You do not understand. Moving will only make things worse. They sense vibrations. They sense fear. If you run, they will wake faster." Ji-won knelt beside her pod, looking directly into her eyes. "Then help us understand. Tell us what is really happening here." Kayla closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, there was a different quality to her gaze. Older, sadder, as if she had made a decision that would cost her everything. "My people were called the Velthari," she began, her mental voice becoming clearer and stronger. "We were explorers, scientists, builders of beautiful cities among the stars. We lived in peace for thousands of years." As she spoke, images began to form in their minds. Cities of crystal and light floating in space. Beings like Kayla working together, creating art and music and technology that seemed like magic. Then, "We found something in the deep space between galaxies," Kayla continued. "An ancient signal. A call for help from a dying civilization. We thought we were rescuing survivors." The images in their minds changed. A dark ship drifting in empty space. Velthari rescue teams entering the vessel, and then something else. Something that moved like smoke and shadow. They called themselves the Devourers, Kayla said, and her mental voice carried a horror that made all four humans step back involuntarily. But that was not truly what they were. They were something much worse. They were a consciousness that consumed other minds. They turned entire species into extensions of themselves. Minho's scanner beeped softly. Captain, her brain activity is showing patterns I've never seen before. It's like there are two different thought processes running simultaneously. Because there are, Kayla said, and now her mental voice carried a note of desperate urgency. The parasite has been in my mind for over 3,000 years. I am the last free Velthari consciousness, but I will not remain free much longer. Yunji looked up from her equipment. The seismic activity is getting stronger, and I'm detecting energy signatures from the other pods. They're warming up. That is the automated system, Kayla explained. It was designed to keep us in stasis until the infection was complete. But the system is old. It is failing. The pods are opening whether the process is finished or not. Jiwan felt his stomach turn cold. What happens when they open? The beings that emerge will look like my people, but they will not be my people. They will be puppets of the Devourer consciousness, and they will be hungry for new minds to consume. Hyunwoo moved closer to the group. How many pods are in this facility? This chamber holds only a few hundred, Kayla said. But there are many chambers, many levels. The scans your ship conducted would have detected perhaps 10,000 pods in this building alone. And there are other buildings, Minho said quietly, remembering their orbital surveys of the planet. Yes, many others, spread across this world and others. We were a populous species. Kayla tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Jiwan caught her arm to steady her. The moment their skin touched, something extraordinary happened. Images flooded Jiwan's mind, but these were different from the mental pictures Kayla had been sharing. These were memories. Raw, unfiltered experiences. He saw through Kayla's eyes as the devourer parasite first entered her mind. He felt the horror of watching her friends and family transform into hollow versions of themselves. He experienced the agony of fighting, a battle inside her own thoughts for thousands of years. But he also saw something else. He saw Kayla working in secret during brief moments when the parasite's attention was elsewhere. Creating a partial immunity serum, injecting herself with it. The serum didn't stop the infection, but it slowed it down, gave her periods of clarity, and during those periods, she had sabotaged the stasis system. Not enough to free her people, because that would have released the parasites, but enough to keep the automated revival process from working properly. You have been fighting this thing for 3 millennia, Jiwan said aloud. The serum I created only delays the inevitable, Kayla replied. Each day the parasite grows stronger in my mind. Soon, I will be gone completely, and what remains will serve the devourer. The floor shook again, harder this time. In the distance, they could hear a sound like metal groaning under enormous pressure. The lower levels are pressurizing, Yunji reported. Something down there is definitely coming online. The main devourer mass, Kayla said, and her mental voice was filled with ancient terror. It has been dormant, waiting for enough host bodies to become available. The failing stasis systems are triggering its awakening protocols. How big is this main mass? Hyunwoo asked. Large enough to consume the minds of everyone on your ship. Large enough to reach across space to your home world if it gains access to your technology. Jiwan looked around at his team. They were scientists and explorers, not soldiers, but they were also human beings, and humans had a long history of refusing to abandon people in need. There has to be another way, he said. Some way to separate you from the parasite. Some way to save your people. No, Kayla said firmly. The infection is too complete. The only way to stop the devourers is to ensure they never leave this planet. You must seal this facility and make certain no one ever opens it again. But even as she spoke these words with desperate conviction, Ji-won saw something else in her eyes. Hope. Tiny and fragile, but definitely there. She wanted to believe there was another way, even though her rational mind knew it was impossible. Your brain scans show two distinct patterns, Minho said suddenly. What if we could amplify the human pattern and suppress the parasite pattern? Human patterns, Kayla asked, confused. Our neural activity, Yoonji explained. Every species has unique brainwave signatures. Maybe human patterns could interfere with the parasite somehow. Kayla stared at them for a long moment. Your minds work differently than ours. More chaotic, less organized. The devourers prefer ordered thoughts. They find chaos difficult to process. The building shook again. This time, they could hear the sound of metal doors opening somewhere far below them. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide quickly, Hyunwoo said. Kayla looked at each of them in turn. If you try to save us and fail, the devourers will have your ship, your technology, access to the stars where they can find new civilizations to consume. And if we don't try, Ji-won said quietly, we abandon 10,000 people to a living hell. For the first time since they had found her, Kayla smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. You are a very strange species, she said. Most intelligent beings would have left by now. Yeah, Ji-won said, checking his equipment. We get that a lot. The sound of mechanical systems activating grew louder from the depths below. Ji-won could feel the vibrations through his boots as massive machinery that had slept for millennia began to stir. Whatever was happening in the lower levels, it was big, and it was getting closer. Yoonji, can you establish a link back to our ship? Ji-won asked while helping Kayla sit down on the edge of her pod. Working on it, Captain, Yoonji replied, adjusting her communications array. The interference from this building is massive, but I think I can punch through. Minho knelt beside one of the nearby pods, running his scanners over the sleeping Velthari inside. Captain, these readings are incredible. The neural activity in these pods is completely synchronized. It's like they're all sharing the same dream. That is because they are, Kayla said, her mental voice weak but clear. The devourer consciousness links all infected minds together. They see what it sees. They think what it thinks. Individual personality is gradually consumed until nothing remains. Hyunwoo moved to the chamber entrance, weapon ready. How long do we have before they wake up? The automated systems were designed to revive us slowly, over many days, Kayla explained, but the system failures are accelerating the process. Hours, perhaps less. Ji-won studied the strange symbols glowing on the walls around them. These markings you mentioned earlier, they store information. Yes, the complete history of my people, scientific data, cultural records, everything we were before the infection, including information about the parasites, Minho asked. Kayla nodded slowly. The early research teams documented everything they could before they were taken. The data is all here, but it is written in our language and stored in quantum matrices that your equipment cannot read. What if we had a translator, Yoonji suggested, someone who could interface directly with the storage system? You would need a Velthari mind to access it properly, Kayla said, but any Velthari mind that interfaces with the system risks alerting the devourer consciousness to your presence. Ji-won felt an idea beginning to form. It was dangerous and probably impossible, but it was human in its complete refusal to accept defeat. What if we used a human mind as a buffer? I do not understand. You said our neural patterns are chaotic, hard for the parasites to process. What if a human mind interfaced with both you and the data system at the same time? Could that hide your access from the devourer? Kayla stared at him with wide eyes. The neural feedback could kill you. Human minds are not designed to interface with our technology. But it might work, Minho said. catching on to Jiwan's plan. If Captain Jiwan could create a bridge between your consciousness and the data system, you could access the research without triggering the parasite network, and hopefully find something we can use to fight back, Hyunwoo added from his position at the door. Kayla shook her head desperately. No, the risk is too great. If the interface fails, the feedback will not only kill you, it will alert every Devourer-controlled mind in this facility to your presence. And if we do nothing, Jiwan said quietly, everyone dies anyway. A new sound joined the mechanical noises from below. It was organic and wet, like something massive breathing. The blue lights in the chamber began pulsing in a different rhythm, faster and more urgent. It is awakening, Kayla whispered. The main mass. It senses that the revival process has begun. Yoonji looked up from her equipment with excitement and terror. Captain, I've got a connection to our ship, but there's something else. Long-range sensors are detecting ships approaching the system. Rescue ships from Earth? Hyunwoo asked hopefully. No, Kayla said, and her mental voice carried absolute despair. Other species under Devourer control. They respond to awakening signals automatically. They come to assist in the harvest of new minds. How many ships? Jiwan asked. Yoonji checked her readings. At least 30 vessels of various configurations. They'll be here in less than 6 hours. The situation was becoming impossible. They had hours before a fleet of enemy ships arrived, and even less time before thousands of infected Velthari began waking up. Their single research vessel had no weapons and no chance of fighting off an entire fleet. There has to be something in that data system we can use, Minho insisted. Some weakness in the parasites. Some way to break their control. The early researchers did discover something, Kayla admitted reluctantly. A frequency pattern that disrupts Devourer neural links. But they never had a chance to test it on a large scale. What kind of frequency? Yoonji asked. Quantum resonance patterns similar to what you call brain waves. Specifically, the chaotic patterns produced by minds under extreme stress or creativity. Jiwan felt pieces clicking together in his mind. Human brain waves. Yes, your species produces exactly the type of neural chaos that interferes with Devourer control. But the effect would need to be amplified enormously to affect an entire facility like this. Our ship's quantum processor, Yoonji said suddenly, it's designed to handle massive parallel calculations. If we could use it to amplify and broadcast human neural patterns, it might work, Minho agreed, like turning our brains into a jamming signal. Kayla looked at them with something approaching wonder. Your species truly is extraordinary. You discover you are facing an ancient evil that has consumed entire civilizations, and your response is to figure out how to turn your own minds into weapons. The building shook again, and this time they could hear something else. Voices, faint and distant, but definitely voices coming from the lower levels. They are beginning to wake, Kayla said. The infected ones. Soon they will remember this chamber and come to investigate. Then we'd better move fast, Jiwan said. He looked at his team. Yoonji, start working on linking our ship's processor to whatever interface system controls this facility. Minho, I need you to help Kayla access that research data. Hyunwoo, watch our backs. What about the neural interface? Kayla asked. Someone still needs to create the bridge between my mind and the data system. That would be me, Jiwan said, simply. Captain, the risk. I know the risk, but we're not leaving anyone behind. That includes you and your people. Kayla studied his face for a long moment. Why? Why are you willing to risk everything for beings you do not even know? Jiwan thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Because it's the right thing to do, and because you asked us not to. I do not understand. Your words told us to leave you sealed, but your eyes begged us to save you. Humans have learned to listen to more than just words. The voices from below were getting closer. Soon they would have company. But for the first time since entering, This ancient prison, Jiwon felt something that might have been hope. They were going to try something that had never been attempted before. They were going to fight an ancient cosmic horror using human stubbornness and the chaotic power of minds that refused to give up. It was a very human plan. It was probably going to get them all killed, but they were going to try it anyway. The interface chamber Kayla led them to was smaller than the pod room, filled with crystalline structures that hummed with energy. Strange tendrils of light moved through the crystal formations like living things, carrying information in patterns, too complex for human eyes to follow. "This is the central data core," Kayla explained as Minho set up his scanning equipment. "Every piece of Velthari knowledge from the past 10,000 years is stored here." Jiwon examined the interface chair. In the center of the room, it looked like a medical scanner crossed with a throne covered in sensors and neural connection points. "This is where I make the connection?" "Yes. But Captain, you must understand. The moment your mind interfaces with our technology, you will experience everything I have experienced. Every memory of the infection. Every moment of the battle in my mind. It may drive you insane." "Let me worry about that," Jiwon said. But his hands were shaking slightly as he approached the chair. Yoonji worked frantically at her portable communication station. "I've established a connection to our ship's quantum processor. The link is holding, but barely. This interference is incredible." "It is the main devourer mass," Kayla said. "As it awakens, it generates massive electromagnetic fields. It is trying to jam your communications." The voices from below were much closer now. Hyunwoo positioned himself at the chamber entrance, watching the corridor they had traveled through. "Movement in the main pod chamber. Lots of movement, whatever. You're going to do it fast." Jiwon sat down in the interface chair. Immediately, sensors extended from the chair's arms and back, positioning themselves around his head. The crystalline structures in the room began glowing brighter. "The neural connection will be intense," Kayla warned. "Are you certain about this?" "No," Jiwon said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." Minho finished connecting his equipment to the crystal matrix. Readings look stable. The human neural patterns are definitely causing interference in the system. But in a good way, it's like static that blocks unwanted signals. "Beginning interface sequence," Kayla said, placing her hand on a crystal panel. "Captain, once this starts, you cannot break the connection until the data transfer is complete. If you try to disconnect early, the feedback will kill you. Understood. Do it." The world exploded into sensation and memory. Jiwon found himself experiencing Kayla's life as if it were his own. He felt her joy as a young scientist making her first discovery. He experienced her horror as the rescue mission encountered the Devourer ship. He lived through the moment when the parasite first entered her mind, sliding through her thoughts like ice-cold oil. But he also experienced something Kayla herself had never fully realized. Her memories showed him that the early Velthari researchers had been close to a solution. Very close. They had discovered that certain quantum frequencies could not only disrupt devourer control, but could actually force the parasites out of infected minds entirely. The problem was power. The frequencies required enormous amounts of energy to be effective on a large scale. Energy the Velthari had never possessed. But humans did. "Yoonji!" Jiwon called out, his voice strange and distorted by the neural interface. "I need you to route power from our ship's main reactor through the quantum processor. All of it." "Captain, that will overload our systems. We'll lose life support, engines, everything. Do it. Trust me." As the power flow increased, Jiwon felt the interface connection growing stronger. He could see deeper into Velthari technology, understanding systems that had been mysterious moments before. And he could sense something else. The vast, alien presence of the devourer consciousness itself. It was ancient beyond comprehension, hungry beyond imagination. and it was very, very angry that something was interfering with its awakening process. "Captain," Hyunwoo called urgently, "we've got company." 3 figures appeared in the corridor outside the chamber. They looked like Kayla, but there was something wrong with their movements. Too precise, too coordinated. Their eyes glowed with the same cold light as the facility's emergency systems. "Infected Velthari," Kayla said, her mental voice filled with sorrow. "They were once my friends." The infected beings moved toward the chamber with mechanical precision. Hyunwoo raised his weapon, then hesitated. "Captain, these are the people we're trying to save." "Fire if you have to," Jiwon said through gritted teeth. "Right now they're not people anymore, they're weapons." The infected Velthari suddenly stopped, moving. Their heads tilted in unison, as if listening to something only they could hear. Then they spoke, all 3 voices perfectly synchronized. "Human minds," they said. "Chaotic, inefficient. But they will serve once properly organized. The main consciousness is speaking through them," Kayla explained. "It knows you are here now." More infected Velthari began appearing in the corridor. Dozens of them, all moving with the same eerie coordination. But something strange was happening to them as they approached the chamber. Their movements became less precise. Some of them stumbled or moved out of sync with the others. "The human neural patterns," Minho realized. "They're creating interference even at this range." Jiwon pushed deeper into the interface connection, feeling his consciousness expand beyond his physical body. He could sense the quantum processor on their ship working at maximum capacity, amplifying his brainwaves and broadcasting them throughout the facility. And it was working. All around the building, infected Velthari were stumbling, confusion replacing the cold precision of devourer control. Some of them were beginning to remember who they used to be. But the effort was taking its toll. Jiwon could feel his neural pathways burning under the strain. Blood ran from his nose and ears, and his vision began to blur. "Captain, your vital signs are critical," Yunji warned. "The neural feedback is causing cellular damage." "Keep the connection stable," Jiwon ordered. "I'm not done yet." Through the interface, he could sense the main devourer mass in the depths below. It was enormous, filling vast caverns beneath the facility. And it was fighting back, sending waves of mental energy upward to reassert control over its infected hosts. But Jiwon had something the ancient parasite had never encountered before. He had 3,000 years of Kayla's memories showing him exactly how the devourer consciousness worked, and he had a human mind that simply refused to accept defeat. "Kayla," he said, his voice barely audible. "I need you to help me target the main mass directly. Can you guide me to its core consciousness?" "That will expose your mind directly to the devourer," she warned. "It will try to infect you." "Let it try. I've got something it's never dealt with before." "What is that?" Jiwon smiled despite the pain. "Human stubbornness." He opened his mind completely, letting his consciousness flow through the facility's systems toward the ancient horror waiting in the depths. As he made contact with the devourer mass, he felt its alien thoughts pressing against his mind like crushing weight. But instead of trying to resist the pressure, Jiwon did something completely unexpected. He embraced the chaos of human thought. Every random memory, every contradictory emotion, every irrational decision he had ever made. He turned his mind into a storm of pure human unpredictability. The devourer consciousness recoiled in confusion. It was designed to dominate ordered thoughts, to reshape logical minds into extensions of itself. But Jiwon's chaotic human consciousness was like trying to grasp water with bare hands. And while the ancient parasite struggled to understand what it was encountering, Jiwon struck back. Using Kayla's memories as a guide, he found the quantum frequencies that could disrupt devourer control. And with the power of an entire starship's reactor behind him, he broadcast those frequencies directly into the core of the alien consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the facility, infected Velthari suddenly stopped, moving. Their eyes lost the cold glow of devourer control. And for the first time in 3,000 years, they began to remember who they really were. The scream that echoed through the facility was not sound, but pure mental agony broadcast through every neural interface in the building. The devourer consciousness, ancient and vast, was experiencing something it had never felt before. Pain, confusion, and for the first time in millions of years, fear. Jiwan felt the alien mind recoiling from his chaotic human thoughts, but he pressed his advantage. Through the quantum connection, he could sense Velthari all throughout the facility beginning to wake from their nightmare. 3,000 years of stolen memories were flooding back to them. "It is working," Kayla said, her mental voice filled with wonder. They are remembering. They are free. But the victory was costing Jiwan everything. The neural strain of interfacing directly with alien technology was burning through his brain like acid. His body convulsed in the interface chair as cellular damage spread through his nervous system. "Captain, you have to disconnect," Yunji called out desperately. "Your neural activity is off the charts. The feedback is killing you." "Not yet," Jiwan managed to say through bloodied lips. "The approaching fleet. I can sense them through the network. They're still under devourer control." Through the facility's sensors, he could detect the alien fleet entering the outer system. 30 ships, from a dozen different species, all puppets of the same ancient consciousness that had enslaved the Velthari. They were coming to help harvest human minds and stop the liberation that was spreading through the facility. But Jiwan had an idea. A dangerous, probably impossible idea that was perfectly human in its complete refusal to accept reasonable limitations. "Yunji, I need you to boost the quantum processor's range," he said. "Route power from life support, artificial gravity, everything." "Sir, that will leave us with minimal life support and no maneuvering capability." "Do it. And contact our ship. Tell them to broadcast our location on all frequencies. I want every ship in that fleet to know exactly where we are." Hyunwoo looked back from the corridor entrance, where freed Velthari were now helping him watch, for remaining infected. "Captain, that sounds like you're inviting them to attack us." "That's exactly what I'm doing." As the power flow increased, Jiwan felt his consciousness expanding beyond the facility, beyond the planet itself. The quantum connection was now reaching into space, touching the approaching fleet. And what he found there broke his heart. Each ship was crewed by beings that had once been free. Proud warrior races, peaceful scientists, nomadic traders, all of them reduced to extensions of the devourer consciousness, their individual personalities buried under layers of alien control. But they were still in there, trapped and screaming silently, just like Kayla had been. "I can reach them," Jiwan said, his voice becoming weaker as the neural strain increased. "The same frequencies that freed the Velthari. I can broadcast them to the fleet." "The range is too great," Minho protested, checking his instruments. "And the power requirements would burn out every system on our ship." "Then we burn out every system," Jiwan replied simply. Kayla placed her hand on his arm, and through the physical contact, he could feel her sharing the neural load. Her consciousness joined with his, creating a hybrid human Velthari mind that was more than the sum of its parts. "If we do this together," she said, "we might survive it. Or we might both die. Yes. But your people will have shown the galaxy something that has not been seen for millions of years, that the devourers can be beaten." The first wave of the alien fleet was now entering the planet's atmosphere. Jiwan could sense their weapons powering up, preparing to blast the facility into rubble. But he could also sense something else. The crews were fighting back. The chaos of human neural patterns was spreading through the fleet like a virus, disrupting Devourer control ship by ship. "It's working," Yunji reported excitedly. "The lead ships are changing course. Their weapon systems are powering down." But the effort was pushing both Jiwon and Kayla beyond their limits. The hybrid consciousness they had created was burning through their neural pathways like fire. Jiwon could feel his thoughts fragmenting, his sense of self dissolving into the larger network. "Captain," Hyunwoo called, "we're getting communication requests from multiple ships in the fleet. They're asking for help." Through the quantum connection, Jiwon could hear them. Dozens of voices from species he had never encountered, all speaking at once. They were confused, terrified, trying to understand what had happened to them. Some had been under Devourer control for centuries, others for millennia, but they were free. For the first time in ages, beyond counting, they were thinking their own thoughts again. "This is Captain Jiwon of the human research vessel Kepler," he broadcast through the network, his mental voice reaching every freed mind simultaneously. "You have been liberated from parasitic control. You are free to choose your own path." The B response was immediate and overwhelming. Gratitude, wonder, disbelief. Some species wept, others sang. All of them were experiencing emotions they had thought lost forever. But the main Devourer consciousness was not finished. In the depths below the facility, the ancient mass was gathering its remaining strength for one final assault. If it could not maintain control through subtle influence, it would try direct domination. Jiwon felt the alien presence pressing against his mind with crushing force, trying to break through the chaotic barriers of human thought. This time, it was not trying to infect him. It was trying to destroy him completely. "It is too strong," Kayla said, her mental voice filled with pain. "I cannot hold the connection much longer." Around them, the crystal structures in the interface chamber were beginning to crack from the energy overload. Sparks flew from Yunji's communication equipment. The very air seemed to vibrate with power. "Captain," Minho called urgently, "the facility structure is becoming unstable. Whatever is happening down there is tearing the building apart." Jiwon realized that the Devourer was trying to collapse the facility on top of them. If it could not stop the liberation, it would at least destroy those responsible for it. But Jiwon had one more card to play. Through the quantum network, he could sense every freed mind in the approaching fleet. Hundreds of different species, all experiencing freedom for the first time in ages. "Listen to me," he broadcast to all of them at once. "The Devourer is trying to destroy this facility, but we can stop it. Everyone who has ever been enslaved by this thing, all of us together." "What do you need us to do?" came the response from dozens of species at once. "Think," Jiwon said simply. "Think chaotic thoughts. Think random thoughts. Think about everything that makes you individual and unique, and think as loud as you can." What happened next was unprecedented in galactic history. Hundreds of different species, each with their own unique neural patterns, began broadcasting their thoughts simultaneously. The combined mental chaos was like a psychic hurricane that swept through the Devourer consciousness. The ancient parasite, which had spent millions of years dominating ordered minds, found itself caught in a storm of pure individuality. Every chaotic thought was like a needle in its consciousness. Every random memory was another crack in its control. In the depths below, the Devourer mass began to dissolve, not physically, but mentally. Its unified consciousness was fragmenting under the assault of countless individual minds, all thinking different thoughts at the same time. The building stopped shaking. The pressure in Jiwon's mind suddenly lifted. And through the quantum network, he felt something he had never expected to experience: the death scream of a god. 3 months after the liberation of Kepler 442b, Captain G1 stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive for the first Interspecies Liberation Council meeting. The view was unlike anything in recorded history. Vessels from hundreds of different civilizations, all working together for the first time since the Devourer plague had begun spreading millions of years ago. The neural interface had left its mark on him. His hair had turned completely white, and sometimes he could still sense the thoughts of others nearby. But the doctor said he was remarkably healthy for someone who had interfaced directly with alien technology for several hours. The medical. "Scans still show residual quantum patterns in your brain," Kayla said, joining him at the observation window. She looked different now, too. The pale blue tint of her skin had warmed to something more human-like, and her eyes held light instead of the desperate pain he had first seen in them. "Do you think that's permanent?" Jiwon asked. "I hope so. It means part of our consciousness. Connection remains intact. I find human thoughts comforting now. Less ordered than Velthari thinking, but more alive." Through the window, they could see the construction crews working on the new ship designs. Each vessel incorporated technology from multiple species, creating hybrid craft that were more capable than anything any single civilization had ever built. "The Andrasi engineering principles are fascinating," Kayla continued, watching a sleek vessel with flowing lines dock at the station. "Combined with human power systems and Velthari neural networks, these ships will be able to detect Devourer presence from much greater distances. Any luck locating more prison facilities?" Jiwon asked. "Yunji's new detection array has identified over 200 potential sites in this galaxy alone, and the freed Karathi remember the locations of several Devourer strongholds in nearby galaxies." The liberation effort had grown beyond anything Jiwon could have imagined. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one trapped being had become a galactic crusade. Every species that was freed from Devourer control brought knowledge of more prison worlds, more enslaved civilizations, more ancient horrors waiting to be defeated. "Captain," Hyunwoo's voice came through the communication system, "the council meeting is about to begin. They're requesting your presence." Jiwon sighed. He had never wanted to become a galactic hero. He had just wanted to help someone who needed saving. But the freed species seemed to consider him some kind of liberator, and they insisted on including him in every major decision. "I still don't understand why they listen to me," he said as they walked toward the council chambers. "Most of these civilizations have been spacefaring for thousands of years longer than humanity." "Because you showed them something they had forgotten," Kayla replied. "You showed them that sometimes the right thing to do is also the impossible thing to do, and that chaotic, unpredictable thinking can be more powerful than ancient wisdom." The AA council chamber was vast, designed to accommodate beings of many different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Representatives from over 50 species were present, with more joining by quantum communication link. Jiwon recognized some faces from the Liberation Fleet, but many were new arrivals who had only recently been freed from other Devourer facilities. "Captain Jiwon," the Karathi representative said as they entered, "we were discussing the proposal for joint research stations. The Velthari neural interface technology, combined with human quantum processing capabilities, could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. And the Zafani have offered to share their long-range sensor technology," added another voice. "With their detection capabilities and human navigation systems, we could map Devourer strongholds throughout multiple galaxies." Jiwon took his seat at the council table, still feeling somewhat out of place among beings who had been exploring the cosmos while humans were still learning to make fire. But as the discussion continued, he began to understand what made this alliance different from anything that had existed before. Every species brought their own strengths, but they all shared one crucial element now. They had all experienced the chaos of human thought patterns during their liberation, and that chaos had changed them in subtle but important ways. The rigidly logical Andrasi were now incorporating creative problem-solving into their engineering. The peaceful Velthari had developed a warrior's determination to protect others. The proud Karathi had learned the value of asking for help when facing impossible odds. The psychological effects are as important as the technological ones, Minho said during his report on the research findings. Exposure to human neural patterns seems to increase creative thinking and individual initiative across all species. We're seeing innovations and discoveries that never would have been possible under the old paradigms. It is because we learned to think like humans, the Zephany representative said with something that might have been amusement. Chaotic, unpredictable, willing to attempt the impossible simply because it needs to be done. The meeting continued for hours, with plans being made for exploration missions, research projects, and defensive preparations. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were certainly more threats out there than just the Devourers. But for the first time in millions of years, the various species were working together instead of hiding in isolation. As the formal session ended, Jiwan found himself surrounded by representatives who wanted to thank him personally. It was overwhelming and humbling at the same time. "You changed everything," the Andrasi engineer told him. "Before the liberation, we each thought we had to face the universe alone. Now we know that cooperation makes us all stronger." "You didn't just free us from the Devourers," added the Karathi warrior. "You freed us from the idea that we were helpless against ancient evils." Later, as the station settled into its night cycle, Jiwan and his original team gathered in their quarters to review the day's discussions. It felt good to be with people who had known him before he became a galactic hero. 30 more liberation missions planned for next year, Yunji reported, reviewing her notes. "And the new ship should be ready for testing within 6 months. The technology integration is proceeding faster than anyone expected," Minho added. "Having so many different scientific traditions working together is creating innovations none of us could have achieved alone." "And the military preparations?" Hyunwoo asked. "Progressing well. The joint defense fleets should be operational within the year. If we encounter any remaining Devourer strongholds, we'll be ready." Jiwan looked around at his friends and colleagues. They had all changed since that day in the alien facility. Yunji had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies communication. Minho was now heading up the largest archaeological project in known history. Hyunwoo was training the first integrated multi-species military units ever created, and Kayla had become something unprecedented. She was the first being in galactic history to have experienced both alien parasitic control and human neural patterns. Her unique perspective made her invaluable in understanding and treating other liberated beings. "I still can't believe it. All started because we refused to leave someone behind," Yunji said. "That is what makes your species extraordinary," Kayla replied. "Most intelligent beings, when faced with an explicit request to abandon someone, would respect that request. Humans look deeper. You understood that I was asking you to save me, even while my words were telling you to leave." "So what happens now?" Minho asked. "We've started something that's going to reshape the entire galaxy." Jiwan considered the question. Outside their window, the stars held more promise than they had in millions of years. There were still Devourer facilities to find and liberate, ancient threats to face, new worlds to explore, and a galaxy full of species learning to work together for the first time. "Now we do what humans do best," he said finally. "We keep moving forward. We help anyone who needs help, and we refuse to accept that anything is impossible. Even when we're told not to interfere," Kayla added with what had become her characteristic smile. "Especially then," Jiwan agreed. Through their quantum communication link, he could sense the thoughts of beings across the galaxy. Freed slaves working together to build new lives, ancient enemies discovering they could be allies, explorers and Scientists and warriors all united by a shared experience of liberation and hope. It had started with one person's refusal to ignore the plea in someone's eyes, but it had become something much larger. It had become proof that no one, no matter how long they had been trapped or how hopeless their situation seemed, was beyond saving. And that was a very human thing to believe. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and full of ancient horrors. But it was also full of people worth saving. And as long as humans were part of it, no one would be abandoned to face the darkness alone. That was what made them human. That was what made them extraordinary. And that was what would change everything.